All right. Hi, everybody. It is Wednesday, August 6th, 2024. We are recording this a few days ahead of the 5th anniversary of the infamous August 10th, 2020 derecho. So if you do see this beforehand, yes, we know it's not the anniversary yet. We know on the calendar. We're recording this early to make sure that we can align schedules and things like that. Obviously, if you're watching this, you probably know this is the biggest, severe weather event in years in Iowa by, its intensity, the number of people affected, the number of people who are also caught unawares in some cases as well. So here to discuss it with me, my name is Zane Satry. You guys probably know if you're clicking on this video, is Jason Sadeko, who is the chief meteorologist here at KCCI as well. And he's going to talk to us too, because he was here working that day. I was not. I was on vacation. We'll talk about that as well. We're going to walk through what happened. We're going to talk about what Jason obviously remembers from that day and the days afterwards, what went wrong a little bit with the forecast. We'll touch on that, how unusual this particular derecho was, and also some of the maybe ripple effects and things that have happened afterwards in the 5 years since as a result of these storms. Okay, so Jason, let's set the stage. So you were working weekends, the same job I have now at the time. So you worked that weekend. Let's start off with what you were saying the day before, let's say Sunday, because the August 10th, 2020 was a Monday. What was Sunday like?
Well, we figured there could be storms, the following day. Did we think that it was going to be this intense, epic, historic line that's going to make its way through? I don't think that was on anybody's radar, not to the extent that it was. But we figured there were going to be storms. There was a threat there. I would even say a conditional threat there. And we just figured that it would be a storms like any other day. And that's going into, to the forecast. We look at any number of things, and not a lot of it pointed to a very high-end day. So we thought moving forward into that day, sure, we could see some storms, but to the extent that we saw them, I think was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. Just for, kind of concision, we have the Storm Prediction Center outlooks from the weekend before. So this is the day 3 outlook. Obviously, every forecaster is a little bit different. You're going to maybe talk about different things, but most people are familiar with SPC outlooks like this. They see them on TV or online on social media all the time. So this is the early morning update from Saturday. So 2 days before. Here's the one from Sunday, the day before. That's a level 1 out of 5 risk, and it's across southeast Iowa. So nothing wild there. So Jason does the 10 on Sunday night. And then here's the outlook shortly afterwards. So this would be about 12:30 in the morning on Monday. We have a slight risk, level 2, wild stuff, across far southern Iowa. Nothing more major than that. And then let's actually get the radar loop up here. Okay, so let's let it loop again, because that's obviously the actual derecho happening. There's the early morning hours. There's some thunderstorms that form in southern Minnesota or southern South Dakota. And then those obviously lasted a little bit longer than they should have.
Yeah, than anything showed. Than
they should have. And then all of a sudden they plowed across the state of Iowa, and we had a whole thing happen. So for the blow by blow, we'll go through some of these warnings here. So you have some thunderstorms that form in South Dakota. They're what we call elevated overnight. They're rooted several thousand feet up in some warm air aloft, as overnight thunderstorms often are. And then overnight thunderstorms, as Jason knows, are sometimes a little bit hard to predict, how long they're going to last. Very often they die in the morning hours. If they do last a little bit too long, and all of a sudden now the atmosphere starts to recharge and heat back up, well, then that's a little bit. Oh yeah, a little bit. There's some other stuff too, but that's a little bit of what happened here. So that morning, were you going to work on Monday morning anyway, or Monday during the day, or not?
Yeah, I was doing the noon show Monday. I was filling in for, I think Matinka was off.
Okay.
And like I remember, I was going to come in early, just to be safe, So I got in early, and I remember when I got in, Eric Hansen was sitting at the weather desk. And I was like, what are you doing sitting at the weather desk? And he's like,
Move.
oh, yeah, exactly. He's like, well, there's this line of storms that are coming in, and I'm watching them, and I started looking at them too, and all of a sudden we get an 80-mile-per-hour wind gust report, and I'm like, to me, like I took it with a little bit of a grain of salt because I just didn't expect that at that point, even though we had stronger storms a little bit west of us, and then man, it just everything ramped up so quickly after that. Like I think that report was maybe out of Creston. And it wasn't long after that Curtis came in and we went wall to wall for about 4 hours.
I was going to say, I was looking back through some of the warnings from that day. So the timeline goes here. The first severe thunderstorm warning that's in, our market, our part of the world, is in Crawford and Sac counties. That comes out at 8:53. Okay, so that's when it's, now southeast of Sioux City. And it's a very basic warning, right? 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts, quarter-size hail. It's a fast-moving storm motion, though, of east at 55 miles per hour. So you're thinking, okay, well, that's kind of something, but nothing crazy. And the following few warnings are all like 60 to 70-mile-per-hour tagged, meaning that's what they mention in them. And like, we've done this, and people get those warnings all the time, and, they don't really think very much of them.
No,
so
normal for Iowa.
Yeah. The first severe thunderstorm watch comes out at 8:55 for central Iowa. And then at 10:02 is the first one. I was looking back through storm reports. 10:02 is the first time we see an actual gust from the Carroll Airport, which is between Carroll and Glidden, of 74 miles per hour. And then after that, you mentioned there's an 80-mile-per-hour report. Yeah, there's really not that many reports, though.
No, it's the morning. When things roll through in the morning, like people are getting ready for work. You've got people leaving for work. It's just when you get them in the afternoon and the evening, everybody's home and people are seeing things as opposed to just people being gone, Yeah. So for us you typically don't get those as often in the morning hours.
Yeah, because I looked through and we get more of those 80-mile-per-hour reports eventually that come in from personal weather stations from Jefferson and Grimes, but those are actually all after the fact from what I looked at. So really through the middle of the day, we really don't get a lot of confirmation that there is what eventually gets confirmed as 100+ mile-per-hour winds, even in this part of the state. So let's go to, let's just for fun, let's pull it up. Here's Jason Sudeiko.
Oh, I look so
2020
young.
era.
I look so young.
About 10:20 or 10:28, as you can see in the morning. Let's sample them.
It's
turned out not to be that high.
It's crazy though. There were some reports, or there were some radar readings where it was picking up 130, 140 mile-per-hour winds.
Yeah.
And I remember multiple times on air saying our radar tends to run a little hot.
Right.
This is far from the radar. The beam's a little higher. We don't know if this is actual ground truth. And there was one that I remember doing a reading of, and it was 143 miles per hour. And I just said on air, there's no way. And then we got a confirmed report of 142 mile per hour wind gusts, which is just, that's insane.
So this at this point, right, you don't really know the magnitude of everything because like you just said, radar data, it's deriving those based off of the radar itself. They're usually at least, this far away, probably a few thousand feet off the ground. So you assume it's probably not going all the way. That's not translating all the way to the ground. So the first actual destructive level warning, that means 80-mile-an-hour winds possible, doesn't come out until 11:19. So this is almost 50 minutes after the clip you just watched. And that is as this line of storms is now coming through about the I-35 corridor or so. And then this is now the Weather Service office in Des Moines actually finally starts putting, I shouldn't say finally, they don't know either, right? They have, there's obviously
the same information we do.
Yeah, there's a lot of reports of trees down, but in all honesty, we get a lot of those reports all the time. Trees blow down in not always the strongest of winds.
Exactly.
So finally, they're able to feel confident enough to issue a destructive level warning. And this is for now Powys, basically from the Des Moines metro area and eastward. through Tama, Poweshiek, Mahaska counties. And so this is for 80-mile-an-hour winds. The storms now are moving at 70 miles per hour.
Yep.
And they put in the warning, these are very dangerous storms. And they make the little addition in here, good on them. This is an extremely dangerous situation with tornado-like wind speeds expected.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And I think a lot of people, like, I mean, you get people that you know, we're Iowans. We understand, you know, tornadoes are damaging, but there's still a lot of people that don't think of just straight winds as that impactful. So those warnings come out, and I don't think they're always heeded. But man, if this ever taught anybody a lesson, it's you listen to those warnings, because a line of storms like this, man, the damage this did was incredible across almost the whole state.
And we'll talk about that. But yeah, at this point too, actually the southern end of that line that goes through southern, or I should say south of the actual storms, end up having severe wind gusts too. They end up having to issue warnings across southern, like Highway 34, Highway 2, just from the gust front blowing out to the southern end.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, the Storm Prediction Center issues a PDS watch, particularly dangerous situation watch, for eastern portions of Iowa. That happens at 11:25, and then finally, we all know what happens. The worst of the damage happens in Cedar Rapids, north of Iowa City, and so on. They get their first warning at 11:48 in the morning, and that is when the storms are still about 2 or 3 counties to the west. So by then, we finally know, oh, this is pretty serious, and that's a destructive level warning too, 80-mile-per-hour winds. And then things really start to pick up here. We finally start to get actual confirmed, like really high-end reports. At 11:43, one of the DOT RWIS stations, so like the little roadside stations along Highway 30 near Marshalltown, records a 91-mile-per-hour wind gust. Less than 10 minutes later, the Marshalltown Airport reports a 99-mile-per-hour wind gust. Yeah. And so then at that point, the Weather Service issues something that's quite rare, which is a severe thunderstorm warning mentioning the potential for 90-mile-an-hour winds, which by then they've got confirmed. But like very rarely do you see a warning that's issued for 90-mile-an-hour winds.
This may be the only time in my career that I've seen that. Like I honestly can't think of another time that I would have seen that.
I was trying to look it up. It hasn't happened for a long time, or at least since they put actual numbers in warnings. Yeah. So at this point, 11:52. Now this is for Poweshiek, Marshall, Marion County, Tama County. The storms are moving eastward now. These are very dangerous storms, and they put in the warning, you are in a life-threatening situation. Yeah. So now things are escalating. And it's about 12:30 when those actual storms get to Cedar Rapids, and we know it gets really, really ugly at that point. I was actually, when I was looking at reports from here, have you ever heard this one before? So the Atkins Fire Department, Atkins, Iowa, is in Benton County. It's west of Cedar Rapids. Someone from the fire department or EMT or something like that measured a 110-mile-per-hour wind gust from a handheld anemometer.
Oh my God. Oh, no. So they were standing out there in it?
I don't know. I'd never seen that before now when I was looking up for this video. Somebody was standing outside.
That seems questionable. I mean, I appreciate them getting the report, but my God, I hope they were safe.
How'd they read it?
I don't know. I don't know.
Holding their handheld. I mean, I have one of those too.
Your arm up in 110 miles per hour.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, and there's another one we'll talk about too. So anyway, this line of storms gets to Cedar Rapids, and it does absolutely, horrific damage. And the Weather Service basically continues warning this all the way over to the Mississippi River, with, mentioning 90-mile-per-hour winds potential on these storms. So let's talk about the actual scale of the damage here. We've got a few different, ways to look at this. We can talk about the magnitude of the winds, the actual strength themselves, the duration of the winds, which was highly unusual. Yes. I mean, let's just look at, I don't have a ton of pictures, but like this picture is from the damage survey the Weather Service over in the Quad Cities did of a radio tower northeast of Marion. I think they rated this damage at like 120 or 130 mile-per-hour winds it would have taken to do that. Yeah. I saw a picture from, actually, I think it was from Ames, of like a lawn chair, like a little deck patio furniture in someone's siding on the side of their house.
That's some crazy debris right there.
Into the siding. Yeah.
But again, this is stuff that we typically see with, stronger tornadoes around these parts. Not not just a line of storms. So to see even that radio tower down because of this is incredible. That's just incredible. It's not something that's normal.
And then the part that really gets wild is obviously all the damage that was done to especially the infrastructure that was supposed to keep like the power on. There are a lot of people who over in eastern Iowa who went without power for a week to 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
This image is from NASA. Some people have probably seen this before. If you look at, it's a map of Iowa at night, and it shows you how the lights are gone, especially in that basically Highway 30 corridor from Ames-ish eastward towards Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. So there's the day after. You see Cedar Rapids kind of vanishes, and then it slowly reappears.
Slowly comes back.
over the next several days. I mean, there's the day of, there's the day after. There's this dark patch across that whole eastern central part of the state. I think all told, at one point, I think like a third of Iowa did not have power. Afterward, people couldn't communicate. I mean, that's part of the reason, we didn't necessarily get all these reports or, what happened.
No way to relay
yes,
them.
you couldn't be relayed. I saw there was a wind gust at the Iowa City airport of over 80 miles per hour, but it was recovered afterward from the data. Like it couldn't in real time be relayed because obviously there were power issues and communication issues and all those sorts of things. Obviously, the crop damage is another thing as well.
Yeah. It's like a bulldozer went across the state.
Yeah. Because I remember when I got back, I was on vacation out in the mountains. I was in the Cascades. That morning, I had just left Crater Lake in Oregon. Beautiful place, by the way.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, we had been without service. So we get out of the park and we have service. And I happened to look at my phone, and then I don't remember why I looked at the radar, but I did. And there was this, obviously potent little complex of storms heading through western Iowa at that point. Yeah, because I was 2 hours behind. And I was like, oh, but I didn't know that it was, on the forecast or that too. Yeah. And anyway, and later when we got back, this was like 3 or 4 days later, we drove up to my parents' house by Ogden. So we drove up Highway 169, and it's kind of right in the western middle part of this yellow outline where you can see the scarring from the swaths of corn mostly that were blown down. I mean, corn was flattened. The beans were defoliated. I think the average outlook for their estimate of yield by acre dropped from like 200 bushels an acre for corn down to like 110 or something, which is crazy.
That's a massive impact
in this state. Yeah. And the corn had already been weakened in some cases because of the drought situation that was ongoing at that time in August of 2020. So you have just this wild stuff. I mean, grain storage, the giant bins had been blown over, just like punched by the wind and whatever debris it was carrying. So you have all this sort of stuff. I guess we should show people the actual map from the Weather Service that shows these two main damage swaths. One kind of starts in southern Greene County and goes through southern Boone County over south of Ames. The second one starts over, north of Marshalltown, northeast of Ames, goes through Tama, Benton counties, and then intensifies to those, what was later categorized as 120, 30, 140 mile per hour damage in parts of Cedar Rapids, and caused all of that awful stuff. Before we talk about anything else, we probably should mention that 4 people died from this derecho nationwide. One was in Indiana. I remember hearing about the bicyclist who got hit by a tree in Lynn County, somewhere by Cedar Rapids. And then there were 2 people in Poweshiek County, a woman in Malcolm who was killed on her porch by a tree that fell, and then a electrician in the town of Brooklyn who got electrocuted while trying to work on a down power line. So
yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah. Awful stuff there. So what went wrong with the forecast? We already kind of mentioned that this storm, we had storms overnight in South Dakota that sort of persisted a little bit longer than they were modeled
expected to. Yeah.
Yes. And when I looked at a lot of this stuff after the fact too, there were some of the modeling also depicted, basically was forecasting there should have been some basically scattered non-severe storms in Iowa overnight, which would have basically tamped down the
instability and the threat as much.
Yes,
Yeah.
the later instability that was actually there when those storms that weren't supposed to be coming out of South Dakota went in here.
Yeah.
I do think it's worth mentioning though, this was, yes, the forecast was bad in this case, but the fact that we all remember that probably does point out that usually the forecasts are fairly solid. If we can, if you can remember how all these blown forecasts perfectly, then it's not happening that often. But yes,
Exactly.
it did happen. I do remember also seeing, if you look at this radar animation here, you can see some of the hallmarks of a severe wind event in them too, where that big Boeing segment starts to appear right over the middle of Iowa at 11 o'clock noon or so on. There's a bow echo. You also see evidence of a rear inflow jet, basically dry air flowing into the backside of the storm as it heads towards I-380, Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, which enhances the downward motion of air. There, I do remember hearing a talk also at our conference that we have every year in Ankeny, I think it was last year, from I think a grad student at Iowa State, that when they remodeled the atmosphere that day, there was a noticeable, I'm paraphrasing, like dry pocket in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, basically between the Des Moines area and Cedar Rapids. And of course, we know what that would mean if all of a sudden you have more dry air to entrain in the storm, and that's going to cool and evaporate the rain and accelerate downward. And guess what happens? And that's something that, we don't have a lot of data on because we can't. There's a weather balloon in Omaha and there's a weather balloon in Davenport.
Yeah, we're not going to have perfect information.
Yeah, we're not going to see that. Yeah, we're not going to have the sort of high resolution data to know that ahead of time. And in some cases, we have even lower resolution data now. Okay, so let's talk about some of the after effects. I wrote down some here. You tell me if there's others I'm forgetting. One thing that is good that has changed since then, the expansion of wireless emergency alerts.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
To now include, so basically what we're saying is now your phone will anyone's phone that has their alerts set up will now get an angry sounding text message if you get not only tornado warnings, but also if you get a high-end severe thunderstorm warning like was issued that day. That wasn't happening yet in 2020, and it was in the process of being developed, but they kind of rushed it out faster so that by the next year now and beyond nowadays, right. So I think
people need to make sure it's still like that they have those on their phones.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people will get one and be like, I don't ever want to hear this, but could be life-saving information. I mean, literally could be life-saving information. So
yeah. And this event proved that it's not just tornadoes that are really, can be highly destructive and life-threatening. Also, this is just anecdotal, but like there were a lot of trees that were lost in this storm. Because what do people ask you sometimes? They ask it to all of us. What do they tell you? Is it windier now? Right?
Gosh, I forgot.
You've had those people
all the time. Constantly.
Is it windier now than it seems windier this year?
We've had so many days with strong winds. This isn't normal, is it?
Here's what I think. I think anecdotally, I think between that derecho, which I think the DNR estimates were 7 million trees that were destroyed or damaged,
50% of Cedar Rapids tree canopy was blown down.
Yep.
And you could see it driving through there. It was insane.
I was going to say, you probably should, before we go on, you should probably talk about the day, because you went to Cedar Rapids to do the cleanup stuff. Was it the day after?
Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah. What was that like?
It was weird. Like, I think people say, oh, it looked like a war zone. And I think that gets way overused. This didn't necessarily look like a war zone, but like the extent of the damage just kept going. You get a tornado and it can be, hyper localized because that'll be on the ground for 3 or 4 minutes. But I remember driving east, Brandon from Channel 5 was with me, and just seeing all of the trees down. There were so many roads that we couldn't even go through because there were so many trees down all over the place. And you got into Cedar Rapids, and I mean, nobody had power. There was no power anywhere. And we ended up stopping at a food and supply collection spot for a lot of people. And we were helping organize there. But like, I mean, the amount of windows that were blown out was immense. You look at trees in that area, and I went hiking even like a month after that. Oh, it's in Wapsie, and you look up, and it was like 3/4 of the trees snapped. Like
Yeah.
it's not like these trees were blown over or lost limbs; they were just snapped in half. And think of the destructiveness and just the power that's necessary to do something like that to a tree. But yeah, like when we were driving around, even through some of the more commercial areas in Cedar Rapids, there were very few areas that were left untouched. We drove past, what is it, KCRG out there. And I
Mhm.
remember it was so eerie because you're driving by, nobody has power, and they had their letters above their station, and
Oh, yes.
two of them had fallen off because of the storm. And it's just like this is literally something of an apocalyptic movie. Like it's just, you don't see this widespread of destruction. Not that all the destruction was that bad,
Right.
but
But
even
a lot of it
driving,
was.
a lot of it was. In the amount of people, like the stores in the area, that people couldn't get enough tarps because of the roof damage too. So I mean, you looked around and everybody had tarps on their roofs. And I mean, that's when you had a lot of the scammers that were coming in and, you know, selling new roofs to people and then never delivering, which is terrible in itself. But yeah, it was, that's one of the more impactful relief efforts that I've ever been a part of. It was crazy to see.
That reminds me of so we both know a couple of people. I have a friend who works at KGAN, one of the other stations there, and Sarah, your former intern, who also
Yeah,
was a couple of years behind me at Iowa State, she was working at that station too at the time. And I remember hearing about how during when it was happening, because these winds lasted for, in some places, half hour or 45 minutes, over an
yeah,
hour, which is highly unusual
yeah,
to have those gusts, severe gusts that strong, that long. They had to leave their studio in the middle of when they were on TV,
yeah,
because they're in a TV. You know, folks who've never been in a TV studio, most of the time, most TV studios are 2 stories tall, and you have a grid of lights hanging from the ceiling.
yeah.
And so all of a sudden, they have their building has 100+ mile per hour winds blowing by it, and everything is
Shaking.
shaking.
Yeah,
So
you've got dangers all above you. Like,
they had to go out in the hallway and just stay on TV in the hallway,
oh my
looking out
God.
the window at what is going on in their parking lot down the hallway, because they couldn't stand safely in the studio at that time, which is
I'm
just,
sure the view was still dramatic out the window, though. You know,
yeah.
like with that wind continuous, that
I
had to be
think,
crazy.
as I say, I think I have an uncle who lives in Cedar Rapids too, and I vaguely remember him saying, my aunt had gone down the basement. He was standing up out, on main floor, looking out the window, and then as soon as he saw all the trees starting to fall over,
Yeah.
he was like, "Yeah, okay,
Well,
maybe I'll go downstairs
this might
now.
be a big deal. Maybe I'll take this
This,
seriously
this
now.
seems a little worse than
Yeah.
usual."
A normal
Um,
storm.
but anyway, so the trees, all right.
Yeah.
I think anecdotally, that is why some people think it is windier, because between that storm, between the 2021 storms as well, which
Yeah.
granted that happened in December, so not as many
Still.
trees were blown down, so because there are no leaves,
Yeah.
and then all the ash trees dying in the recent years. I think that's why some people think it's windier, because where you live, your little unique spot in the world, your house, might not have as many trees around it
Yeah.
as it
You're
once
less
did.
protected.
And so you're more exposed to the wind. You're hearing the wind more. You're
Yeah.
feeling the wind more when you walk out into your yard. Even if you still have a tree, you probably lost a bunch of limbs. That tree is
Yeah.
probably damaged in some
It's
way.
not as dense.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
my
I think that's a
conspiracy
good
theory.
thought. And I mean, you said 7 million trees across Iowa. That's a lot less friction for that wind to hit. And yeah,
So it might not be windier, but I think some people just now notice the wind
yeah, they're
because
feeling it more.
the places they're in are not as protected by
Vegetated. Yeah.
trees anymore. Also, after the fact, we had the word derecho, get out.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, it was a buzzword after that.
yeah, tell us exactly how that transpired. Because I didn't get back to work. I was working over at WHBF in the Quad Cities at the time until about 5 or 6 days later. So like
Yeah.
by then it had already happened, all that sort of stuff. And everybody now all of a sudden had heard the word derecho. And I was like, yeah, it's nothing new.
Meteorological phenomena. Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
something we as meteorologists, hear a lot and deal with a lot. But I mean, just because we have, a word that defines a certain type of storm doesn't mean anybody else really understands what that means or even hears that classification. So, I mean, this has been around for decades. And yeah,
Yeah.
people, I say it's been around for decades, but again, this was a rare storm. So
Yes.
people attach their brain to this being a derecho. No, not all
No.
derechos are the same. They're not all alike.
It's like experiencing a high-end tornado
Yeah,
for the first tornado we've ever been through, and then you think all tornadoes are like an EF 4 or 5.
exactly.
Right, which is not the case.
No.
Yeah. So between the people who think that we made the word up on the spot, and then the people who think now that every derecho should be that. Yeah, that's just not
And
true.
people that just, they don't think that it's ever been a phenomena before.
Yeah.
When it has. I mean, there's a long cataloged history of these occurring. But I think the thing that struck me the most was almost like the mass PTSD from this storm. Because every time we talked about, okay, we've got a day where we'll have storms with the potential for damaging winds, everybody, for every single storm after that, is this going to be a derecho?
Yeah.
Like that thought process still carries on today.
And even if you say yes, you have to qualify that by saying, but not in the way you're thinking, probably.
Exactly. It's not going to be 2020.
Yeah, because I know what you're thinking, and it's not probably that.
Yeah.
Which is why, like there are some times where I wish the word had not gotten out to the public.
I agree.
Because it's such a technical
cyclone or polar vortex or anything.
It's like every textbook sort of technical academic term that we have that gets out and then is misunderstood by people,
and it's morphed into other things for dramatic purposes.
Yeah.
So
I also had forgotten that this happened during the pandemic too, which I mean, I didn't really forget, but all of a sudden I saw the pictures of people like wearing masks and having to huddle in the back room of a store. And I was like, oh geez, between all of that,
there's a lot going on.
I forgot about that part. Oh man. Yeah. Is there anything else you think I forgot? Obviously it's a massive event in Iowa, whether not only recent history, but probably it will be for a while, unless something bigger happens, which let's hope doesn't.
I think one of the most heartwarming things ever for me to take away from this was, you had immediately like a Facebook group that was created that had derecho in the name, like people impacted by the derecho, and it was just people trying to get other people what they needed. And people setting up, I've got a chainsaw, I can come help you cut this up. Like the complete and utter support from random people from all over to come and just help everybody. I've seen that before. We see that regularly when, we have significant weather events here, but on the scale that this was, and I mean, we had food trucks, we had a barbecue truck that would just drive around and give people free meals. Like the amount that the community was uplifted because of this and everybody just wanted to help was so heartwarming. And seeing that it gives you so much faith in people.
Yeah, because everybody was affected in some way. I mean, so many people, unlike usual severe weather where it's pretty isolated to some places and not others.
Yeah.
And everybody has a story from that day or that week as well. It reminded me actually, so I was obviously, out west gallivanting in the mountains, but when we were driving back, we were driving on I-80 through Wyoming. So this was maybe 2 days later.
Yeah.
And what do we drive by? A literal caravan of utility trucks.
Yeah.
Like the big, line trucks with the baskets and everything on it. And I was like, I wonder where those are going. Yeah. So
there was a stat at one point that we had utility trucks from I think it was from 25 different states or something.
Yeah.
That were combing around Iowa. Because that level of damage, how else are you going to get power back? With just our crews, we're not going to be able to do it in a timely manner. So
because I guess I forgot to mention too, this was at the time, I think still is today, the costliest single thunderstorm event in U.S. history. I think at the time is $11 billion worth of damage. Inflation adjusted, that'd be like $13 or $14 billion now, 5 years later. So just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So hopefully today we've given you a little bit of I don't know. Maybe you didn't want to think about it. Maybe you didn't want to recollect,
Maybe
reminisce.
you wanted to
But,
tuck these in the past, which is
but we
fine.
did.
Yeah.
We talked about it anyway. We know we didn't talk about all of the stuff too.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you have a story you want to share with us, by all means, you can send us an email
Sure.
to us, to me, to Jason. If you didn't know, it's weather@kcci.com.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, there'll be other stuff I'm sure that we'll put on TV at some point in the coming days as well. So thank you so much for listening, Jason. Thank you for coming on as well. And
Absolutely.
now Jason has to go do some other stuff here for the rest of the day. So
Work never stops.
yeah, have a great day, everybody, and we will see you again in another video.